Well, good morning. Thank you so much for joining us today on this very blustery day in Southern California. We are here today with Professor Aurelio de la Vega. I am so pleased to be introducing you to him today. Well, some of you may have heard of him already. Professor de la Vega has been a lecturer in all different parts of the world, Venezuela, Brazil, Canada, all over the US, and has received many, many awards, including an honored professor award from the CSU, California State Universities, all in general. He also had a Grammy nomination in 2009. Am I right about that?
4 Grammy nominations.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Pardon me. And then there was also the Latin Grammy, right?
Yeah.
And not including the numerous honor awards and medals that he has received. You just received something very interesting from Spain.
Oh, yes.
Didn't you?
Yes, we have to tell the audience, though, that mainly and basically I'm a composer.
Yes.
Not a lecturer. You see, the lecturer is some of the side things one does in life.
Yes, indeed. I mean, ultimately, you are a great creator of art and of music. That's why people want to listen to your lectures. But it helps to know that you have such a great knowledge of music and visual arts. I mean, you're particularly known for your knowledge of the Latin American contribution to art, right?
Yeah, sure. That's my secret love is art.
Your secret love.
Shall we say, no, my secret love is human beings. Yeah.
Why does that have to be secret?
Oh, because sometimes it's very dangerous.
Yes, indeed. Actually, your life is full of all sorts of adventures, dangerous in the mind and in the heart as well as physically. Will you please share with us about your background, about your childhood starting out in Cuba?
Well, I was born in Cuba from a rich family, and we had a wonderful childhood and a magnificent adolescent years. And then came Mr. Castro and his tribe, and I left first, and then my parents about 10 years later. And we lost everything, of course. You know, I came to this country with $5 in the pocket to start all over again, you know. So those things are accidents of history that are very peculiar. Sometimes they touch you, sometimes they don't touch you, you know. So we came here, we rearranged life, and we had a nice career, you know. I mean, my relationship with the culture here has been nice, you know. It's a mutual respect, and this is very nice. And the years I was in the university were also good because, you know, again, the same thing was kind of a mutual understanding in everything. And I could travel a lot, and they had, you know, things arranged for my absence, so that was very nice.
Well,
in the meantime, performances all over the place, here and there, and this and that, and then here I am, 94 years of age, still looking at beautiful women like you. That's very important. And enjoying life until the day comes. When I am in my box, I am going to be smiling.
Well, let us hope that happens no day soon. Indeed, we have many more great things to hear from you, I'm very sure. If you don't mind my going back in time, you have such an interesting history. You say it's accidents, but if you don't mind, I would say that they're sort of helpful influences to who you have become as a composer and an artist. It would help us to hear some more about the juxtaposition of your early childhood and how you were trained and how you became a composer to then leaving Cuba for particular reasons and then coming to the States. Will you explain to us a little bit more about your earlier years and what your childhood was like in Cuba?
Well, my childhood and my early years were very pleasant, very nice, and Cuba in the 50s, for example, was a complete paradise, I mean, no more or less, I would say, if you were in New York or in Paris, it was a tremendous amount of activity and so forth. And unfortunately, it was caught by the revolution. The same thing that happened in Russia, the same thing that happened in France, all these major changes of history sometimes are very hurtful for some people, and it hurt me because it completely separated me from my family for many years, and this kind of situation. But all these things, I think that the fact that we suffer, different type of things, is very important, because suffering makes you appreciate then the contrary thing. Mm-hmm. If you have everything, then, that's not so good. You have to have your little drama.
Your little drama.
or your big drama. And then, you adjust things, and you have a theme, of course, in life, I think life in itself, I have said this many times, life in itself is nothing, It is us, human beings, that make something out of life. We create life, life doesn't create us, And this is very important because then you mold your own soul, and if you suffer, you start thinking, because then it's an internal thing, and all this different, interaction between you and life, and between you and the humanity around you. Always trying to be, the best I could do. I mean, I love human beings, and if the human being that I am talking to is not a completely negative or monstrous person, I have a very beautiful moment, I don't lose my time with idiots or with, evil people, I'm not going to change them. I'm not a savior, I give let's say in this case, my music is a message, If it is appreciated or loved or, makes some impact in 10 people, that's good, If it is 10,000, better, But I'm never going to prostitute my music so it is enjoyed by millions and millions and millions of people. I'm not interested in that.
Tell us some more about your music, because, for some of our audience members who are not familiar with Professor de la Vega's music, he's a champion, if I may say, in the atonal world, also the electronic music world. And one of the interesting things is when we think about Latin American music or Cuban music, we often think of the Yoruba music that we have talked about, and some of the things we've explored in other videos talking about West African music and some of the things that have been brought over to the Caribbean and to Central America. But for Professor de la Vega, he found huge influence in the classical composers from Germany and Austria. Will you tell us a little bit about how you came across those influences? I mean, were they common in Cuba where you were growing up?
On the contrary, were very uncommon. And, my aesthetical position created lots of, conflicts. I was called a non-Cuban, I was called, I didn't have a country, I didn't love my country, all these kind of things. The interest in this kind of music was definitely because my main professor came from Austria, Fritz Kramer, who was a composer and a pianist and so on. He came to Cuba because of the war. And this man opened things for me that were incredible, because, for example, if you take Cuba in the 40s, people didn't know at all who Alban Berg was or who Webern was, or nothing like that. They knew a little about Schoenberg, and this business of the 12th tone and all these kind of things, but it was not the common thing. The common thing was the line from France and Spain, coming to us, and the combination also of African influences and European influences, creating a very interesting situation. I was not interested at that time in neoclassicism or Stravinsky or anything like that, because definitely this man opened for me a world that no one knew at that time. Mahler and Bruckner and Richard Strauss and all the kind of things, and Schoenberg, and this was fantastic for me because I am internally a very orderly man, and I like creation with order, and the German and Austrian axis offered me that. I mean, it was a music that was very crafted, and it was full of innuendos in many ways, of the human being, and a music that looked also inside. It was not a music for the outside, the music is inside. And the philosophical angles of all those things, fascinated me, and then I discovered more and more and more. I remember, I'm talking about the years of the war, for example, and you wanted to get a score, you wanted to get a score of Webern, or you wanted to get a score of Szymanowski or something like that. It was impossible. It was, And I remember I discovered finally a man in New York, an older man, that will sell all these things on force. Some of them came to Cuba almost in pieces, with no binding or anything like that. But I have all these things, that were incredible. No one in Cuba knew about that. No one. Webern was what? What is that, It's a baseball player or what?
A baseball player.
So that was my road, and I continuously proceeded, because I found very comfortable in this structures, I would say, type of music.
It's sort of ironic that you ended up leaving Cuba, and in some ways you had already left the musical traditions that they were telling you were Cuban and right long before that.
Oh, yes, that's right, yes.
Do you feel like you were a little bit of a rebel?
Yes, I was always a rebel.
Well, indeed, it seems like your whole musical journey has been a little bit of a rebellious one, because that's not originally what your family wanted you to do, right?
That's correct. My family was worried, and I understand that. My family was worried with me being a composer and living life with that labels, I would say. You're going to die of hunger, This is there is a certain truth, I understood perfectly well later. My father was very adamant, and at that moment it hurt me and it was very difficult. And then with the distance, you understand that they thought that with their best intentions. But I did whatever I wanted to do, and I am very happy because, if I would be, I am a lawyer too, but I never use a career. I hate, that thing. I did it just to have a diploma for my father. But if I would be here in this country, focused on that profession, I am not an idiot, as you think, so I would be a millionaire, and I would have 3 yachts in the bay, but I would be very unhappy.
But then again, wasn't it music that gave you a position in this country with the universities?
Yes, university. The American university was a haven for the composer of classical or serious music, whatever you want to call it. Absolutely, it was the only thing that protected you, and that you have a salary. You could eat nicely.
But do you think you would have had that same kind of life coming to the United States if you had tried to secure a position as a lawyer? I mean, you were trained in law in Cuba, but would it have turned out the same for you coming to the United States?
Well, the law here is different from Cuba in many ways, but there was, for example, twice in the 50s and in the 60s, twice the American, shall we say, bar associations of the whole country, in a very nice gesture, asked the Cuban lawyers if they would like to, exercise their things here, except they have to pass the bar. But it was not a matter of going to university to have law again. And many people told me, you should do it, just for fun maybe. I never did it,
For fun?
Yeah, well,
And law is not your only background. Didn't you say you also studied engineering?
Well, 1 year. It was, again, the perspective of the time is interesting. When I did that year, because my father was an engineer, he got his his studies in France, and married my mother, who was a rich lady from society, and so forth. But, I say, all right, I will do engineering to please you, and then I'll do whatever I want. But it was completely a foreign thing to me, And after 1 year, I said, no, I cannot do this, it's a struggle with things that I don't like or love, But later, when you consider what happened with this year in engineering, you also think it was positive because it gives you a certain amount of structural ideas, and even measurements in a piece, So nothing is lost, really. I think nothing is lost in life.
I would say that it seems pretty clear to me, having played one of your pieces, and two of them at this point, and I have to make a little point in here that Professor De La Vega's music is so beautiful, but some of the most difficult that I have ever attempted to learn, and certainly very difficult to perform. I think with your cantata, I pretty much had to just learn it by muscle memory.
Yeah.
Because I could not fully grasp the pitch relationships. And later on, listening to the recording, then I got the meaning from it, hearing how all of the pitches went together and how the poetry was supported by the entire texture.
That's right.
Of the instrumentals and the vocals around me. But it was a very difficult experience to just make it happen. And so looking at your music, I can see the parts that there's some mathematic trends in it. They're like in your labyrinth, the consecutive augmented fourths that we were seeing. Just so that you know, the Magic Labyrinth, which we will do a later video on, is such a fascinating piece because it's a piece of music that is just as much a piece of visual art as it is audio art, in that the lines in the music are written in such a pattern that you can choose which direction in which to play. And that is sort of a nightmare for the musician that has been taught to read from left to right. And but in doing that, my four-hands partner and I had to figure out what patterns were there and what things could be repeated, what could be themes that were recognizable. And we found that there were many sort of mathematical trends that you set. Also in the increases in size, those exploding balls, the gradual increases in numbers of pitches you would put in a row. So certainly when I look at that, I say, no, this is the work of an engineer. Maybe not the kind of engineer that you were trained to be. But then also at the same time, when you're talking about your lawyer training, certainly you must have had some training in rhetoric and in understanding how people discuss things and how people relate on controversial topics. And you see a lot of conversation happening in your music. It's fascinating to see, and it makes me curious to know what some of your goals were behind these pieces when you were expressing. Were you thinking, oh, there's certain mathematical patterns that I really like that I would like to use and put in patterns, like maybe like a collage kind of thing? Or was it, oh, this particular poetry inspires me?
Well, I think the main thing in my music is, how could you say, it's a serious trip. It's not a superficial thing, pleasant, and so forth. I love to dance. I love to hear popular music, but that's not my creative idea. That's an enjoyment of something, I'm not saying that this music has to be hated. No, that's not the point. But it's a music that has lots of things interior, And you start thinking, what is the meaning of this? What relation it has here and there and so forth? There is a musical relation, there is a human relation, there is all kinds of things like that. I think that the difficulty in some of the music that we have written in the 20th century is, instead of being a barrier, it's not a barrier, it's something that you become as yourself, intrigued by, and that you have been, shall we say, strong enough to say, yes, I was going to discover what is here, which is magnificent. And as I said before, if this music touches or intrigues, a dozen people, I am happy with that, because it's not music for entertainment, it's music for thinking, Most of my poetry, when I use the human voice, all the poetry that I have in my pieces are from Cuban poets, with one exception that I did something with Tagore, Rabindranath Tagore. But with that exception, everything is a Cuban poet. This has a meaning too. I mean, this is a continuation of my journey. I am not one of those people that neither explore being Cuban, oh, I am a minority, how wonderful, and so forth. You don't understand. No. I am a human being inserting in a society, and I do my journey, and wear it in a certain way when the piece itself is not satisfactory to me. I'm a very critic of what I do. And once a piece is finished, I put it like an objective situation, and I look at it and I say, well, here something is missing, or here, whatever, And this is also very good because it's like, shaping the piece until I'm happy with it, But it's always, if you read the poetry, it's always something that is inside, of you. It's a spiritual journey, not only a musical journey, and not only a sound journey. As you mentioned, it's a visual journey. Sometimes in those pieces, it's a relation to humanity, it's whatever, and it's an interesting puzzle, It's a puzzle. It's like a puzzle. You put the last piece, you are very happy.
Yes, but in my case, working on your music, sometimes I feel like I finish the puzzle and then that last piece is missing, and I'm going crazy. It does feel like that sometimes because for someone working on your music, it can feel sometimes like you're putting together something, and then you're going, wait a minute, what am I trying to put together? I see all these little pieces, and I have no sense of the big picture. And then when it's finally done, you step back and you go, oh, that's really neat. It reminds me a lot of Kandinsky.
Sure.
So I'm looking at these
one of my great loves.
Beautiful paintings. I would imagine so.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I always, because my second love is painting. I mean, it's art. And I always think that sometimes musicians are very narrow-minded,
Sorry.
They only do, no, there are many that the only thing they do is music, music, music. They never go to the theater, they never go to a paint exhibit, nothing, you know. And this is not good. It lacks dimension, you know. You have to know what art is, you have to know what, theater situation is, you know, and mix everything. And then you have a very interesting orange.
A very interesting orange. You know, speaking of interesting oranges, in 2019, Aurelio de la Vega was actually honored by the Dodgers, the baseball team, given the Cuban of the Year award. And
hero of the community. It says hero of the community. Imagine.
That's very important. Well, it makes me think, you know, we tend to live in a world where we separate the what is enjoyed by the populace from what is considered sort of high art. And people would consider, well, going to a stadium and eating a hot dog and watching a game as something that's more for the populace. But clearly you cross those lines because they thought to give the award to you.
Oh yeah, I crossed definitely. As I said before, I love to dance. I used to love to dance. Now with 94 years, the hips don't move right. You know?
No, they move left.
Oh, yeah.
So what do you think is the main thing that separates for us the serious high art that people say from the music for the masses or the art for the masses?
Well, I think what happens, Julie, is that, you know, if you are an artist in that kind of super world, let's say, you have the advantage always to come down to the human mass and to the populace, as you say, you know. The contrary is what doesn't work many times. It means that person that is in that level, you know, never goes up. Sometimes, yes, but very rare. I mean, it's much common to do the driving down than to do the driving up. You know.
What can we do to try to bridge that gap?
Well, look, remember we have spoken about this. The human ear is very poor, and the eyes are incredible. You know, enter into a place and 2 minutes later, you know everything, where the exit is, how many people are inside, what colors are in the wall, instantly, you know.
True.
And somehow the perception between the eyes and the brain is very quick. It's incredible, you know. The perception between the ear and the brain is very poor. You know, that's why popular music is simple. Why is it repetitious? In the folklore situation, usually it's like that, you know. Because the author, whatever he is, knows that he has to repeat a theme, for example, to the person finally hear it, you know. So what happens is that being this ear so bad, you know, for example, when you ask people, you take anyone in the street, you know, you ask, you like music? It's very rare that someone will tell you, I hate music. You know? No, I love music. And then you say, well, what kind of music? And then you will see that levels 1, 2, 3, and 4 are the common ones. Then when you start going up, do you like chamber music? You know, this kind of thing. Now, how do you take care of that? First of all, I think human beings come to this life with certain cells, you know, that permit this journey or that journey or the other journey. You know, it means there is a kind of a situation in your brain soul that permits that journey, and it is a blessing, you know, if you were born with that situation, because then you can develop it. I always told my students in the composition class, you cannot really teach composition. You know, it has to be that you have something inside. And what I am going to do, I'm going to tell the journey between A and B, you know, so you don't go to straight, you know, because this is the thing. But if the seed that you have doesn't have germination, forget about it. Nothing happens. You put all the water you can and the plant doesn't grow. But if the seed has this incredible magical thing that comes with you to this earth, I don't know how and why, then it is important that you put the water, because then the plants grow. And you can tell someone that has the imagination already. The imagination of creation I cannot give to anyone. This has to come from the person. The person doesn't buy creativity. You cannot go to the corner in the pharmacy. You buy 2 pounds of creativity.
Buy 2 pounds of creativity. How I wish.
So if you have it magnificent, you know that you go through the process. You take someone that has the experience of that journey. That is easier this way. You can tell someone that is creating an orchestral piece, that this sound, because of experience, doesn't work as well as this other one, this kind of thing. But it has to be this thing in the person. Now, if that human being that is in a big mass has those things, then the obligation is to give that person water. Which is sometimes not the case. Sometimes people cannot proceed. People cannot go to a conservatory or to university. People don't find the right person that takes it by the hand and makes them grow. Which is one of the beautiful things of being teaching. You have, I don't know. Imagine how many. I was teaching in CSUN, Calif State, Northridge, for 34 years. Now, in these 34 years, how many people came through my, place of study? I don't know how many they were, in the thousands probably, And in those enormous amount of people, there are 2, 3, 4, that have been really composers, that they have their own career already, that they flourish. Many of the other ones, and they, nothing happened really. No performance or whatever, And then you have to be a computer expert or a baseball player.
A baseball player. Well, now this is interesting because we've been talking about people with their creative abilities and composers and potential composers. What about listeners? Because we may have a lot of people that have the ability to create, and if you just give them the right situation, just give them the right water, they will grow. But then if there isn't enough appreciative ears to listen to what they have created, then it's sort of a moot point, isn't it?
That's right. The audience is very important. One of the things that have happened, this is kind of a sideways thing, one of the things that has happened with serious music, or whatever you want to call it, or classical music, it's a very peculiar situation. The mind, when going, making different changes, the harmony became more and more complicated and so forth. And it comes to a point, in our time, for example, there are diverse schools, the school of Chamberlain, Boulez and company, and some other people have said, no, that's not the thing, because the human ear doesn't perceive that. It is a mind thing, It's like I told my students, it's like if you invent a trip to Mars, And here I am, and I am in the rocket, and I feel that it's going, and I look at the Earth, and it's small, and now we come to the planet, right? No, you never left Earth, So everything is here. The art cannot only be here; it has to be here. It has to come from your inside, has to come from your heart, from whatever, Heart it's not the organ exactly, it's the meaning of the heart, And if you don't have that, forget about it. Now, it is important for a society to cultivate the people, to give them something, to give the audience something. America is very, in that respect, kind of behind, what happens. in some other parts of the world. First of all, we have very tremendous prices, in the concert hall, in the opera, and so forth, which is not possible for the people to pay.
Right.
And what happens is that the people can go to those places are not precisely neither very intelligent, neither very feeling, what the music is all about, It's a very strange situation because we don't have this channel where people could hear an opera for $20 or something, instead of paying $300 to have a nice seat. I mean, this is incredible.
It is a big problem. And I feel like, when you said that the music has to be in your intellect and also in the heart and in the vestiges and all of the body. Each human being is born with that, are we not? I mean, maybe to varying degrees and maybe in different balances of that, but there is a certain responsibility that we have as artists to remind people that they have all these elements and that they have a right to experience all of them in full. And I feel like what you were saying rings so true that particularly in our American culture and environment, we tend to make that full mind and body experience for the elite and those who can afford it. And it really is something that should belong to everybody, don't you think?
Oh, yes. Well, first of all, the term elite is very interesting.
That is
because
true.
For me, elite is a collection of human beings that have developed, their whole brain and body and so forth in a beautiful way, to give someone something, You do that, which is magnificent. I have been observing your idea with people, with groups and so forth. And this connection is lovely, it's one of the most beautiful things. Now, sometimes I call elite to those people that are very rich, I don't think that the elite is a matter of being rich. I think it's a matter of being beautiful, in the mind and the body and the heart, So this thing, elite, because you have $3 million, what is that? I don't think that it's wrong to have $3 million, but obviously it's not the label that I would put as elite, Right. You're very happy that you have $3 million. What do you contribute, with the $3 million? Some people do. Some people contribute, undoubtedly, And there are some moments in which you say, okay, there is a seed for the future, like in the LA Philharmonic, that they have the Yola Orchestra and so forth, with the young kids from the barrio, things like that. This is magnificent. This is absolutely magnificent. Because this kid from the barrio is not going to throw a stone, and it's not going to smoke, marijuana or heroin, as a means to life, No. This kid is going to have a violin or an oboe or a French horn, and that is magnificent.
It is magnificent,
but it's not enough. It's not enough. We need more of that in every corner. A country that is the most rich country in the world, really. We should have in every corner a symphony orchestra, and an opera house, and whatever, in every corner. Instead of this thing, oh yes, in Los Angeles it happened. Oh yes, there is a group in New York. Oh yes, there is... No.
Every corner, along every street. That's true. It would be nice if we had more availability to access art that brings us brings us that full experience of what our humanity is. Another issue that I feel like we come across is bitterness. Sometimes when I talk to audience members, they will say things like, oh, well, I always thought that classical music was just for this particular group of people with this particular education and wasn't really for me. And then, so I never felt compelled to try to listen. And I think that's a big problem. How can we explain to people or make it known that that great listening experiences are for everyone.
Yes.
It's very, very difficult.
Well, what happens too, we come back to the same problem, Julie. Some people, unfortunately, are not able to enjoy that. They are not able. You know, the situation here between this and the brain doesn't create the right combination to enjoy a symphony of Beethoven. You know? Now, why is that? How is it possible that this guy, you know, had it and this guy didn't? That I don't know. You have to talk to God or to chemistry, I don't know what. But obviously, it's a problem. And there are people that will never be able to do it. You know, I sometimes I would say to my students, you know, the problem is that you find human beings that, you know, you take a cow and you play the Jupiter Symphony to the cow 100 times. And at the end of the journey, the cow will say, okay? So there are many cows in humanity.
Yes. Sometimes I can be a cow too, and I don't understand what it is that I'm hearing. Perhaps when I first came across your music, I felt a bit like a cow. That must be very, very difficult when you have a certain musical language. And for you, it was quite particular. I must say, for myself, I never enjoyed atonal music until I came across your music. I don't know what it was, if it was my point in life in coming across your music, or if it was just because there's something magic in your music that made me understand it. But it was, I wonder about, you know, it's like learning different languages, depending what country you are from. If you grow up with a certain language, it's going to be hard to understand the poetry of someone in another language.
That's true, yes.
So then you've sort of purposely chosen a language that's foreign to many people, and it takes quite a bit of effort to understand.
Yeah, but you see, it's different. It's not that I have chosen it.
I see.
It is that this particular, well, of course, I have chosen it, but not as a prelude to something, you know. Now I have to, no. It grows in you, and for some reason, that sound, or that spectrum of combination of sounds, creates some kind of inner world in the composer that is what he needs, what he wants, you know. The problem is that you have never to forget that there is a listener.
Yes.
You know? And many of the music of our time, the music of the chamber, you know, extending to the Boulez school and so forth, you know, that loses contact with humanity. I agree, it loses contact with humanity. It becomes a kind of a tower art, you know, in which I am there and I don't know. This I was always very, very conscientious of. And how do I achieve, for example, if I play music like my string quartet of the Alban Berg dedication, and listen to this, you know, when the person is over, you know, he has lots of rhythm and tremendous tensions and things, you know. And I ask the person, do you like it? Oh, yes, I mean, I was, you know, moved. Oh. Well, it's a completely 12-tone piece. Now, how is that possible when you compare that to a chamber quintet, you know, or to a Boulez piece, in which the sound in this is so complex that it becomes ugly. You know, you have to be very careful. Music is always tension and distension, no matter what language you use. Yes. If everything is tension, it's no good. If everything is pleasant and plain, it's no good. Life is not like that. It's you know, reaction to things. So what is the secret? The secret is that's what I discovered, at least for myself. I put the 48 rows in front of me. When you have 48 possibilities, you can do whatever you want. This, you know, all 7, I mean the original with 7 degrees, all 7, and here is the inversion 13. And you look at these two things, and suddenly these two things can be very, 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 how you say, combinatorially is very pleasant for the ear, because the ear is going to hear a cadence like in old times. And, and you're going to, that kind of thing. And it depends on how you manipulate all these 48 possibilities. If you don't know, if you're not hearing that there is an audience, you say, oh, to hell with, like Babbitt said once, to hell with the audiences, this is ridiculous. It's like playing the Ninth Symphony of Beethoven in the moon,
To the moon or the cows.
Yeah, exactly, why do you do that, So it's very good that you said that, because it's true. I am very conscientious that the piece has to be not falling in the trip of, oh, I'm going to be commercial. No. But you have to be remembering that there is a human being that is going to listen to that, and if everything is completely dissonant and ugly and so forth, this is not going to be enjoyable. There is no problem that this music will never be. I always say, in 200 years, who is going to play Boulez?
I'm not going to answer that question.
When the editor is no longer pushing, because the music becomes, how you call it, public domain. When you don't have all these elements, the critic friend of Boulez is pushing. 200 years. Do you play that music? No, it disappears. I bet you that it will disappear. It will be a footnote in the history of music.
It's so interesting talking about atonal music, because most people, including myself, when I had first learned about atonal music, I thought, who on earth wants to listen to that? I mean, after all, isn't the melody the joy to the ear, and a tonal melody that makes sense, that has a tonal center of one that I can always go back to? But then once you study some other music from other cultures, then you start to see that atonality is not a foreign concept. I mean, after all, when you look at West African music, some of it you can play without any melody at all. People will play for hours on drums.
That's true.
And some of these drums, like the dondo, are what also known as talking drums, are called that because they imitate speech. They imitate the duration and the pitch that speech actually follows, which of course, being many tonal languages in West Africa, is quite understandable. But then they're not necessarily specifically attached to those 12 tones that we have on the staff. They use them, but more in a way that copies our natural speech patterns.
Yeah.
And then when you add that with rhythm and the sort of dissonance of rhythm, which would be polyrhythms and paradiddles,
that's right, yes,
then you have that sense of times when, okay, we're together, and the times when we're not together, and then we're together again, and it feels good, but it's not using our system of 12 tones where there's one tonic, and where we're surrounding everything to that one do, that one tone. And so in some ways, when I've been listening to your music more and trying to think of it less through that lens of, oh, this is atonal music, what I end up hearing is something that is actually more organic.
Yes.
Something that's more natural, that reminds me of something very ancient, actually, a very visceral connection to something that is very physical in a way. It's not just here. And it's fascinating that you have mastered that so beautifully.
Well, remember, for example, people always tell you, take Chinese music, or Japanese music, whatever you want of this type of Oriental music. It's a music that works horizontally. It's not a music that works vertically. The culture has developed in which you hear these melodies horizontally. Now, if you are hearing a melody horizontally on that one again, you produce immediately, all kinds of clashes. You know, and the music becomes atonal, really.
Yes.
Because the vertical relations don't exist. You know, there is a famous. This is very interesting. There is a famous anecdote. In 1902, we are in Berlin, and the German Kaiser has invited, you know, the ambassador of Japan, and there is a big thing to rush, you know, of people and so forth, and there is a concert in which they are going to play the Fifth Symphony of Beethoven. And the Kaiser is seated there, and this ambassador is seated there, and his collection of entourage and so forth. They play the piece, and at the end, the Kaiser asks the ambassador, "Did you enjoy it?" And the answer was fantastic. He says, "Well, what I really enjoy more was before the conductor started conducting. It means when the orchestra was tuning." Because this reminds him of his music. You know, and then the tonal music of Beethoven, I don't know what is that, you know.
Interesting.
I mean, it shows you the tremendous differences in cultures and things, and how people, when they say atonal music is in the West, you know, Central Europe, no, wait a minute. Atonal music is also there. You know? These things are very, very fascinating, very fascinating. Now, in Western culture, we have developed the contrary. We have developed the concept of verticality. You know, a chord is a chord, you know. I mean, you are hearing in that vertical situation.
At that one moment.
And that one moment, you know, and then this can change and whatever. But it's already a very, very, well, it's a very complex development, really, you know, because we started, you know, remember the beginning of music in Greece, you know, is utilitarian. You know, music is for a funeral, for a march, for a whatever. And then at the end of the Greek culture, we have these contests, you know, in which someone comes with the flute and plays something, and the other guy says, "I'm going to do more long and more better," you know, and then at that moment, music became music. Because it was not attached to anything. It was not attached to a march or a funeral. It was just music. And let's see who plays this goddamn flute better, you know what I mean? And from there on the journey, you know, the journey that for centuries we only heard one line, you know, we're singing, you know, in a group, and everyone was singing the same tones. And then one day, you know, in the 11th century more or less, so there is a second thing, you know? There is a second thing. Oh my goodness, you open the door to tremendous things, because the minute you say there is a second thing, you know, a structure changes and you bring into the arena, you know, perspective, like in paintings, and suddenly you're growing and growing, and you create a tremendous piece.
Can we talk a little bit more about what makes a tremendous piece? Before we've talked about, you know, creating something that's more than utility, creating something that's more than just a structure, a shelter, but a monument. What becomes an architectural, glorious thing that everyone remembers. I mean, we build that in music as well, but what makes it not just a cluster of tones and makes it into something monumental?
Well, first of all, I think that this monumental idea has also to have a concept of time. It means when Webern says, "Oh, I have reduced, you know, the thing more and more. What is not important, I erase it. So it's like, you know, 3 bars are like no, I'm sorry, that doesn't work like that. You need, you know, a tremendous space of time to create something, you know. So there is time involved in it. There are also elements, you know. I don't think you can have a solo voice and create a monumental piece. Impossible. You know, you have to have a group of people. The bigger the better in that respect. I mean, in this respect, Mahler, Bruckner and Mahler and Strauss and so forth were very clear, you know. And Schoenberg, remember, the biggest orchestra that was ever used is in the Gurre Lieder. It's the biggest orchestra that ever in Western civilization existed, you know?
I actually did not know that. I always thought it belonged to Wagner.
No. This is the most tremendous orchestra. Now, the sound itself, this mass of sound that is produced by a group of people is also very important. Because if you create layers, you know, this thing becomes more and more monumental, you know? So it's an element of time, of use of instrumental forces. The seriousness of the purpose is very important. I mean, it's not the same thing to hear the B minor mass of Bach, you know, than to hear, you know, a dog barking. No, this is a tremendous thing that comes from the mind. You know, this guy created this structure. It's like you're creating architecture, a monument, you know. And there are layers of things, and you know, and suddenly you go there, bang, and you create a tremendous thing. From the pyramids, you know, to Dalí creating, you know, a monument too, you know. So this thing of the monumental has to have many, many factors involved. It's not something that... Now, there's another thing. You can have many forces. You can have tremendous choir, you know, 15 soloists, whatever you want. And the piece might not be monumental. Because the creative area doesn't create that. It created a piece that is boring, you know. Sometimes I hear a piece that says, oh, come on, you know. The minute you introduce this idea that I don't want to hear more, the piece is dead. You know?
Indeed. You know, perhaps I'm not completely disagreeing, but possibly throwing a wrench into the argument there is that there's one of my favorite composers, of course, Chopin.
Yes.
And he was known for writing pieces for the humble, singular solo piano.
Yes.
And I think of his pieces as being monumental.
Oh, yes, some
like
of them are fantastic.
Sonata.
Some pieces of Liszt, things like that, yeah.
But that's for one person. That's one instrument. So then what makes that monumental?
There is an element of time, remember that.
That is true.
But it could be that the beauty, which is an element that we also develop. I mean, what is the meaning of beauty? Beauty for an Oriental person, or beauty for a Muslim, is different from beauty from me. You know, because I belong to a certain culture that comes from Greece, where they created a beautiful female nude, which is fantastic, and all the forms are great to today. So this thing of beauty is also very dangerous, because beauty for you can be different from beauty for me, you know. But if you are in the same boat in the Western civilization development, and you take Chopin, you know, which was a monster of creativity. You know, there are some composers that remembered always the importance of melody, of a theme, very important. When Schoenberg started dilapidating all these things, you know, we are not going to have repetition. Bullshit, excuse me. You know? We are not going to have repetition. We are not going to have structure of any kind. The piece begins and ends, you know, with you know? And all these things, you know, the destroyment of all the parameters of Western culture at that moment, the piece becomes completely dead. If you remember that these people, this atonal school, the Viennese atonal school, discovered very, very soon that a piece that didn't have a text was going to fall apart.
Interesting.
So, when you have the pieces of these people that are songs or that are operas like Berg and things like that, the minute you introduce the text, you know, and the piece becomes then a drama of some kind, this saves you. If you write an instrumental piece only with no text, good luck. You know, at that moment, you know, I mean, they created something like that, and these pieces are not played. You know, Coming back to Chopin, I think that in that case, the monumentality is, he creates a span of time, but it's less, shall we say, additive with sounds. It's only one sound. Now, this person, like he was a pianist himself, was able to create a world of sound of his, you know, sometimes extraordinarily beautiful. Yes. And extraordinarily complex at the same time, because, you know, some of the pieces technically are very difficult to play.
Yes.
Very difficult to play, you know. But he knew all these tricks, you know, and he gives you a piece with all these sounds and tricks, like Liszt, you know. My God, you know. This is the monumentality that they created out of an instrument that they knew very well. You know. I always tend, I am not a good pianist, I am a very bad pianist. But I always, when I write a piece, I go to the instrument after the thing is over. And I, with my little hands, try to see where they go. Some people think that I am a very good pianist because of that. No, it is because I put my little finger in the keys. Say, no, this is no, you know?
Well, we appreciate that
Very
as pianists,
important, very
that you try
important.
on your own clothes.
No, and also when you write in a tonal piece, and you go to the piano, and you say, here we go, and this doesn't work. This doesn't work. This works. Because this instrument is the only one that gives you the polyphony, you know, to all the things that you have invented. I mean, you have a chord of 15 notes. What in the hell is that? You know, hear that sound, you know? Go and see how it sounds, you know?
Yes, I feel very fortunate to be a pianist because I feel like I have such a large palette of colors I can work with as one person.
Yes.
It must be very difficult when you have something like a flute or something where you can only play one note at the
That's right.
at one time. Well, of course, there's overtones and things like that, but it's different when you can experience a whole symphony on your own instrument with transcriptions and things like that. I hope you don't mind if I kind of go to a non sequitur and ask about this beautiful piece of artwork that you have that's behind us right now. I know you've told me a little bit about it. I know you had it commissioned.
Yeah, this is Humberto Calzada, a Cuban painter that lives in Miami, and that became very well known because he's an architect too. So all the pieces have this architectural texture all the time, you know? There's always the idea of architecture in the piece. Now, this particular thing, you know, it's like the destroyment of the Cuban culture with the revolution, you know, and you know, that's why you know, the things are rotten and so forth, like they are in reality in Habana, you know, unfortunately. You know, one of the most beautiful cities of the world. And I tell you that because I have seen many, you know. And every time that one of those buildings falls because of lack of attention, you know, my heart shrinks, you know. And this is my piano is there. Amelia Pelaez, who was a painter that I love, is there. Is that painting, for example, that's Amelia Pelaez. And the palm is cube and so forth. But the beautiful thing is the colors that he has used.
Yes.
You know, there is a staircase that goes nowhere. You know, things like that. And the water is centered, you know.
You know, there's something about this painting that makes me very sad.
Oh, yes, it's a sad painting. But it's so beautiful color-wise that you forget that. For example, if I am having breakfast there and I look at the painting, it's refreshing, it's very beautiful. I forget the drama and I look only at the piece, you know, the colors, the things how they have been placed and so forth. And the effect is magnificent. I mean, it's very pleasant. Now, when you start thinking what it means, then it's a sad painting, which is one of these mysteries again, you know, how a sad thing can be happy, at the same time, which occurs rarely. That's not very common, Usually it's one way or the other, this is a sad painting, and so forth, or this is a very nice painting, life and violence, whatever,
But there is certainly an element of new growth in it also, because as you can see the water taking over the structure, and you see the beautiful stained glass windows that have been shattered, your piano, as you know, pianos are not supposed to be in water of any kind. It's sinking down into the abyss. You also see this little island of green. And even at the base of the building where it's starting to mold and things like that, you see there's green, there's life in that, there's something new. And it really makes me think quite a bit about the power of art, as I suppose that's what our whole conversation has been about. That,
yes.
It can take the horrible situations in life, like the revolution that you live through, the loss of your home, the being separated with your family, but then also just in the elements of what it is alone, it can be beautiful.
Oh, yes.
And you have made a lot of beauty out of your life.
Thank you so much.
I must say.
That's what I told you. When I am in my box, I will be smiling.
And I can certainly applaud that. Thank you so much.
It has been a pleasure, Judy, and it has been a pleasure to have also Jose here working the mysteries of cameras and sounds and things like that. That's also an art,
It is.
Yes.
It is an art, and he has a very particular deep soul that understands the depths of this to this. He appreciates these fine people like yourself and the history and the arts which we're exploring, so I'm very grateful to have him on.
Well,
board.
thank you to everything that has happened this morning.
Thank you so much.
It's very nice.
And
Thank you,
so
Judy.
much
Thank
for
you.
sharing everything.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening, for joining us on Piano Purpose Peace. Take care.
Wow.